Hello to my fellow colleagues, compositors, friends. I wanted to make another video because I had a bit of free time lately and I started working on the screen-to-screen shot from Action VFX. I think my focus on this video was to make a script just with tools from Nukepedia or tools that are freely available. Because I kept thinking back on when I was a younger compositor and I felt like, there's always unknown unknowns and gaps in knowledge and gaps in information that when you're just starting out, you're like striving to learn. And so I'm gonna give this script away. It's a Nuke Indie script. It's gonna be in the description for the video. But it's me trying to make an output uh, with what this Action VFX video is basically trying to, what it gives you. Um, One of the things that I thought was interesting about this particular shot is the lighting changes on the character here. And another thing that I think is pretty interesting is because they put her on a rig, she's just moving towards the camera, but there's no background in the track. So I think like those two things make things a little bit more interesting. So I think the first thing most compers are going to ask is like, where'd you get the background? So you can get the background from Comfy UI, which can make your own background plate, but it can also break out your um, you can break out your plate into passes now. So you can get a diffuse pass from that plate. So you can get the diffuse pass, and I'm not going to say that these are 100% perfect, because they're definitely not. Like, it's an approximation. It'll give you a reflection pass, and then sort of a reflection pass, I guess, because it doesn't really do color, and then you can use those two, and from them, to get what remains from all that, which I guess would be refraction, but honestly, it's all just kind of like pseudo. Um, when I was making this, Switchlight AI came out with like their own version of this, and I think they probably do a better job. So, we're kind of on the bleeding edge for all of this stuff. I'm just going to try to chat through my thought processes when I put all of this together and just work through all that. Basically, as kind of a freebie or a lesson. Uh, Mainly as well because like I've been going to a lot of Access VFX like digital meetings, and those have been fun. And I've noted I haven't really run into as many compositors as I thought I would, but I feel like if I was younger, I would love it if somebody that's been doing this for a long time would be willing to give me or show me how they approach certain situations. So that's kind of where I am on all of this. One of the first things that I want to talk about from a compositional perspective is like, even though you can get these interesting backgrounds out of Comfy UI, there's a lot of things that aren't perfect about them or aren't great. So like sometimes that involves doing a little bit of paint work or doing a little bit of fixes here and there to just paint or clean up things that could be considered an eyesore or could be considered something that most people would be like, that kind of doesn't work from a compositional perspective. Uh, for instance, like you can tell that I like these backlights are like perspective wise kind of like warping, so I fix those. These things kind of draw your eye away from the composition for some reason, even though they shouldn't be there. Uh, you know, Stuff like that. It's just kind of like obvious like paint fixes. So that kind of stuff was just really easy to do. Nothing that you should worry about, honestly, or off the top of your head. Some of the other stuff I like to do is the shot's really freaking blue. So like I like to go ahead and white balance everything and grade it. I didn't particularly care for like these, I don't know what they are, posters on these doors or dorms. So I just kind of changed them out. to stuff that you can just Google or find on Google search. I feel like it adds like something that's a little bit more interesting or different. Not that it's really gonna matter, but to me, I'm always having like a kind of like an eye for detail or looking at things like just. I think like the way I thought about it is like the color selection on these. It's kind of strange, especially if we look at the plate, which is like a lot of pinks and purples and kind of like, to me, when I look at this plate, it feels very sci-fi-ish with this kind of like jumpsuit. So I was thinking like cyberpunk or sci-fi or something in that world. So that's kind of why I changed these to be a little bit more interesting. Even perspective-wise, you can see that this isn't 100% perfect. So I guess we're just gonna have to let the chaos in or whatever it is that people say. So I changed those out for the diffuse, and that's kind of all I did for just like the diffuse pass on this. Reflection pass here, just kind of did a little bit of a glowy on these, plus it back over. Same thing here, we did some tone mapping. We have another version of, we took like the light from the plate by just blurring it a whole lot and saturating it, and then we just copy paste it or color copy it into the plate, into the highlights, and then we just blend between like the tone mapping and the this version of it. Just kind of dissolve, play with it a little bit, do the highlights, grade it in a little. This grade just adds like a little bit of pink to everything. Just mix it in, plus it over, and then we do the same thing over here. What's cool about this is whenever the plate changes, it will automatically change with the plate, because it's just the plate drives the color correction on the background itself, so you don't have to worry about it as much. Same thing with the tone mapping. These are all keyed to the different highlights and lowlights and mids on her. So you can just kind of tone map everything to what you want it to be. And you can just kind of blend it together between the two. I feel like that gives kind of like a very interesting result. So then you can blend everything together. You have all the lights kind of like doing lights that match what the plate does, getting pink stuff. But what's interesting about this plate is, let's see if I can get it to load. Basically, the lights from the plate change. So you have one light over here. It's like kind of like white light. You have like a really rose, pink, and blue light. And then if you look at like the under parts of her eyes, here and here, there's blue lighting that comes from the bottom. So you have at least 3 lights that are coming into and affecting her on set. So that means whatever happens in the plate needs to have at least 3 lights that are different color lights that are hitting her. So as a compositor, that's kind of something to keep in mind, and that's something that we're going to be tackling as we add more layers to the background. So one thing I do here is I just kind of set the mood. To me, setting the mood, color grading, color correction. You want to make this feel like it's kind of in the same world as she is. So, darker darks, higher highs, more saturated. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But then another thing that I thought about is like this light here and then the blue light coming from the bottom. So I kept seeing this stupid ad on Instagram. I think it's like concept artwork from The Last of Us 2 about this giant whale, but it had like all these little like globe colored things in there. And I felt like I really like these Japanese lamps. I think they look really cool. Or Chinese lamps. Asian oriented lamps. And I felt like if we just did like a little bit of a glowy on them and merge them over, get like a cool little like white hit on them to accentuate like the pink. It's kind of like a little layer here. Just kind of the normal work through. The only thing I think that's kind of different or interesting is the fall off on here. Like you can do like a little bit of a saturation on the edges. Copy over the color from the color copy. Do a little bit of a stencil. And then you just mask everything over so that you just get what you want. And then make reflections if you have them, if you want them. And just glow it and merge it over. So they have like little lamps here and there. One thing I would do, maybe +1 it, is like go into the reflections on the original and have these hits influence these. Something to think about, I guess, moving forward. The baseboard lights I just did with like the line tool. So that was pretty cool. And just do some pre-mults, do some glowies, merge it over, do little reflections on the ground. So now you kind of have like lighting that in some respects works for what she's doing. Obviously there's still things you would do to it, which we're going to deal with in a second, but something to keep in mind. Another thing I noticed as I was working on it was the angle of her is a little bit forward facing compared to the angle of the background that I had. So we did end up having to put it on a card and like lean it over a little bit, but you know, whatever. So that happened. Do like a little bit of a match move. Somebody will ask, well, where'd you get the match move from? So if you do a little bit of a high pass and you can planar track her face and then turn off the rotation, you'll get like a match move for what she's doing. Because obviously we're not going to get a match move from the background since they're pulling her. But I did want the background to pull with her as she moves forward towards the shot. And I feel like that would probably have been the way to do it. It's not perfect, but if you're in like a situation where you feel like the background's really difficult to track, or there's nothing to track, there are other ways to steal tracking from other objects. Um, this is a simple way to do one of those ways. There's a lot of other ways to do it, but that's something to keep in mind. So we did all that. Comfy will give you depth passes. And then something you learn when you hit the big times or in your studios is a lot of depth passes need to be reversed. And once you reverse them, then you can feed them into bokeh, and then you can use bokeh to play around with it till you get something that you like. That's something just kind of comes from experience and from doing a lot of these, I guess. So this should now move with her. That was pretty cool. And then we just kind of do the same thing we did from in the other place. Up here, with the lighting. We just kind of steal the same idea. And we just kind of flash the background with this kind of like lighting thing I did here. We just copy paste it, multiply it, and then plus it over to add like a little something. Make it feel like really sci-fi-y or Stranger Things-ish, or you know, just kind of cyberpunky. So you get something like this, which I think looks pretty good for what it is. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but for like a background that we made in Comfy UI and that we played with for a little while, I kind of dug it. I think it looks kind of interesting and cool. There's more stuff we're going to do to try to make it feel more alive, but for the most part, I think like, you know, it's not bad. It's kind of like a cool little, you know, riff on what the AI gave us. The rest of this is pretty cut and dry. I think I released a video on keying like a few months ago. I wouldn't worry too much about a lot of the different stuff here. One of the things that, I mean, I've talked about this before, but it's like when it comes to compositing, you want to separate big problems into smaller chunks and then take those smaller chunks and get solutions to other problems with that you've done in the past. So one thing about this I feel is like it's super saturated, and you have all these lights hitting her, but you know, you're trying to pull like a black and white matte. So one way I'd like to do is I just like to white balance everything and then just blur everything against itself to try to get to like a more neutral color. And once you're in the neutral color, then use that as like a starting point for a green screen or for like a key. So like, I think that that's kind of like a smart way to approach certain things. Um, Especially like in a holistic kind of way. So now you have like a clean plate, you have her. Obviously it's gonna have holes, but sometimes the holes aren't a problem because you can just fill them in with other keys. So then I just multiply this against green, right? Because we're dividing a clean plate from the foreground, multiplying it against green. So now we have what I would consider like a clean greened, a green cleaned background, I guess, would be like a way to think about it. And then you can key from there, prime mat from there, key chew, do whatever you need to do, merge those channels together to get like solid inside, or more solid, I guess. Um, and then just grade it. So now you have the alpha. Some people would say, well, that looks pretty good. Would you use that as a D-spell? No, not really, because like when you look at this and you look at like what you're starting with, there's like so that's so different color-wise. I guess you could try to like copy the color in, but believe me when I tell you I've tried a lot of those things and it doesn't really work. I would try to split things out or always do the D-spill separately. Think of them as two separate problems that get solved once you have both parts of the problem put together. Never try to like, and even then, these two things are not this thing, which is a completely different extra thing that needs to get done and that, you're gonna have to worry about anyway. So, for the D-spill, you can cut that out. You can unpremult everything. What's interesting about this is it kind of does its own little fill on everything, and sometimes that fill can be pretty useful. But it doesn't mean that that's going to be your be-all end-all, right? Like, just because you have something useful doesn't mean it's always going to be the most useful thing in the world. Um, but it does mean that it's a solution for something. For instance, this. So I would keep that in mind too. I mean, another thing to keep in mind too is when you do this kind of stuff, you could probably still do like an edge detect on this edge. And keep going with the solution, but I don't know. Also, you have to be extremely careful because you have everything that's like blowing the hell out. So just keep that in mind. But for our purposes, for this uh, video, I think it probably would work. So keep that in mind as well. Like this solution is not like the be-all end-all solution for everything. Same thing here. You have this. You eat in, you Kichu, you mask. Now you have like the hard color for the edge, and then you can just edge extend out the hard color, and then copy paste that color into what you have. So that's something to keep in mind as well. It's like color bleeding something out can sometimes give you a solution for these edges, but you have to be careful with it as well. It's not always going to be the most like perfect solution in the world, especially when you have like crazy stuff happening like here. So even averaging them, you might get into a world that's a little bit closer towards what you're trying to get to. Same thing here. We'd probably consider this to be something that's the front side of this, like the core D-spill, and this would be like the edge D-spill. But because these are similar, you can get away with it. You just have to kind of know where you can take your shortcuts and where you can't take your shortcuts. And then the rest of this is like, I wouldn't say you'd be able to get away with this at a major studio, but for the purposes of this tutorial, you can probably AP edge fish, dissolve them, merge them, CB, copy the B-box. Then you have this, which is like a non-soft key, like whatever you want to call it, additive key version of the foreground character with pretty decent keying, pretty decent D-spill. Obviously, if you're in a major studio, they would probably be like, hey, make the paint department paint in this hair or whatever. It's not really that big of a deal for the most part. And I do like a little edge blur. I don't really know if I even need it, honestly, but it's there. We'll get to the rest of this in a second. For the soft key, you just take the background. There's like 10 ways to do a soft key, and honestly, I just use the ones that I know and just blend like what I can from everything. The additive keyer, soft keyer, the other soft keyer to try to get more mids. Key mix in the background so that we're not like contaminating the background with all this extra garbage that we don't need. So it's literally only affected on the character. Truthfully, it should really only be affecting her hair, because we really don't need a soft key on anything else. But I mean, we can, we could probably just mask that out, but whatever. I do a little bit of a multiply for these. I think it's more prominent in the beginning. There. I noticed it more later on. But yeah, for these little hairs. Yes, clients will probably want everything back. But, something to keep in mind. So you get your soft key in the background, just hanging out. Depending on how finicky the client would be, I would probably go in and make like a really somewhat detailed mat for the hair that just kind of stayed around the hair so that it was only adding onto the hair. But, for the purposes of this tutorial, I think it's fine. And then, yeah, like the rest of this is just me gussying up what we already have. Like, I like to add like a little rim light onto stuff, or add some more lighting and like contamination, color contamination on certain things, or maybe like edges, do some masking on certain things. To me, like, you can get depth from AI, depth from depth anything, like the cattery stuff, and you can like push her into the plate because you can grade through the depth so that the front is darker than the back, because everybody knows when you're closer to something it'll feel more dark, further away it'll feel more lifted, and pre-melt all that. Then we just do some like pretty like easy peasy light wrap things, and we merge her over, and then we can control the light, the initial edge light wrap, and then do like an optical glow for like the broader base light wraps, pre-melted, merge that over based on how much you want the taste. And I feel like we're already in a pretty interestingly well integrated kind of place here. Like, it's close, right? Like, I feel like she's in there. As far as like the darks, the highs, the lighting, the mood. So that's all well and truly well put together. We have like the brights from the floor are eating into the mat a little bit. You can see it's affecting in here. Like, yeah, I mean, some really cool, interesting photographic things. The next thing I do is I do like a little bit of an atmosphere. I think I looked online for a smoke thing, and I looked at it and it felt a little fast, so that's what the O-Flow is for. Just kind of a normal thing here. One thing I do want to mention, and I see this a lot, and it still bothers me, is like A is on the left, B goes up, and then masks go to the right. And then at the end of each branch, I do a little dot as like an end of statement. But the other reason I do a dot is like, let's say I wanted to call this line, this thought, I can do that. I know a lot of people go like right and then left, and then they put their A's on the right and everywhere, and it's like, if you were using stamps, then you would just put the stamp here, and then it's fine. But I don't understand, like, it just, you're making your life so much easier by putting everything on the left and being able to call to what you need. So that's just my 2 cents on that, and I see it happening a lot. So I just kind of mix these two smokes together to create more interest. I think that's kind of like the common thing that a lot of people do. Another thing is like you will key the highlights and then plus them over to like push them up a little bit more. To try to like draw out some more detail, make it more interesting. You can do like a little bit of a gain gamma, it's just more contrast basically. You can try to like multiply the foreground and the background. I don't think it really does that much, but hey, it's worth it. Just trying to draw as much contrast as you can. Another thing, you can like ramp, uh, you know, you know what they say, like hot air rises, so smoke will always be closer to the floor, or no, smoke will be up here, but you know, whatever, just trying to increase visual interest and fidelity on the image in general, so I felt like putting some more white smoke down here would probably be more interesting. And then I just take like the different colors and lights and then just blend them into the smoke in and of themselves. You know, like we've already made these up here, so we should probably just use them. So we did. And then you can just kind of key mix certain parts of the smoke together to make like a very interesting kind of like tone mapped smoke. That's something to keep in mind as well. We do some glows based on like the lights that are already in the shot. You can plus them into the smoke themselves. Gamma and gain it. Add some more interest. Basically, the name of the game for the rest of this is just like increase visual interest of the smoke itself. And then you can add more smoke and fidelity from other places. It's also something that's like, you know, was part of the process here that I was thinking about. And then you just do some blurs and some movement, match what's happening in the plate, render it out. The rest of this is just adding some more resolution to the smoke, and then just kind of like, here's a little trick that's interesting, is when you have smoke, the more denser areas of the smoke should be blurring the area behind them. It's like a pyroclasticity thing. That's also something to keep in mind. It adds like a little bit of like, the lighting from here will diffuse out based on what's happening in the smoke, and it adds like a kind of like visual interest to it. So I merge all these back there, and then I key mixer back on front. If you don't use the key mix and you start adding these and trying to use stencils, you're just gonna fuck up your edges. So keep that in mind. That we still keep our nice soft edges that way, as opposed to not doing it that way and getting really weird crunchy edges. And then we do this, which is the foreground, and then we like high pot in on her. We just push it into taste, push in the smoke to where it needs to be. Then we can just do like a little bit of dissolve, copy the B box. So now she's inside of the smoke, which I think is pretty cool. You know, just as something interesting or fun. The particles are much the same way. We had some cool particles I found online. You can stencil out like some of the bigger or smaller ones. You just add some motion blur. This is expensive as all hell, so don't use this if you don't need it. That didn't really do anything for me. This is probably just copying the color from where we had it before, copying more color from before, doing some blurs and defocuses on certain ones to just make them more interesting or cinematic, and then just plus it over. This I think we were just doing like a little bit of a push down on the smoke or on whatever we had in there, which I think is fine. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Lens flares, I just kind of cheat and made like a little, stole the lens flares I guess from the plate itself, just to pre-melt out all the highs. Then you do like a flip and like a stretch, kind of mimicking what would happen in the lens. And then it's just some AP chroma, some defocus. You just stretch everything out, try to make some interesting cool lens flares, crop them, merge them over, plus it over. I have some cool lens flares that come from the plate. I don't know. I mean, you could take this as far as you want it to go. You could find like a cool like aberration or like glass effect or like a sunburst and use that instead. Honestly, like this was made more for fun, but it's also like kind of like a learning thing of like a way of thinking about things. For the grain, just kind of use the grain that came with the plate. I also wanted to use that because like inevitably whenever you denoise something you're gonna lose detail, and also when you like transform and start fucking with something you're gonna end up losing detail through filter hits. So like clients are gonna want that detail back no matter what happens. So that's kind of where that sharpen comes from, and all of this that's happening will bring back detail that should be there. So that's a way to make your clients happy, I guess, is to restore the high frequency detail that would be missing. So keep that in mind, I guess. I'm sure none of this is perfect. Like, the more I look at it, the more I see errors. So, but hey, it looks a little cinematic, so I'm going to run with it. This is just typical AP Chroma vignette crop kind of baloney. And this is just grain that, like, you can find online, like, just through the node, through Grain Advanced, and then just playing with it. Uh, don't forget to uncheck the black clamp on here, or else, your grain, you want your grain to be in the negatives, let's put it that way. And that's it. That's the shot. I thought it was pretty cool. It was fun. I kind of put it together. It's just kind of like, hey, if I were like 3 years into this, what would I show to somebody and be like, hey, here, look at this, and think about these kinds of things when you put a shot together. And yeah, I don't know. When it's like, when you're in like quiet times or like down times or like looking for, uh, you know, things to work on, this was probably something that I decided to work on. Kept thinking of that quote that's like, always look for the helpers, for people that are like wanting to help other people. So like, definitely believe in that quite a bit, of like trying to help people or trying to help others or trying to share knowledge, share wisdom, share thought processes. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on all of this. I think it's a pretty cool shot. I'm still experimenting with different like AI workflows, comfy UI workflows, mostly, because I don't want to pay. I see all these people making these cool things online, and I'm like, you're either paying a ton for like these subscription models, which I refuse to do, or even now playing with comfy UI, I'm like, the amount of hard drive space, the amount of memory, the amount of VRAM that some of this stuff takes, I'm like, this is not a democratic process. This is very much a process for people with a ton of money or a ton of computing power. So, like, yes, you can. I mean, I can do some cool stuff. I have a pretty good rig, but some of the things that, like, the processing that you require is crazy. And I'm not going to spend money. I refuse. I'm sorry. I mean, I may eventually, but I'm not. I'm not in that income tax bracket anytime soon. But yeah, like that's kind of like my thoughts on all of this. I hope somebody got something out of this. And I don't know. Feel free to like send me questions or like information or interest. Uh, I wish I had more to say. I'm doing all right, you know? And I hope you guys are doing well too. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.